I still get a lot of shit about it. Still comments on my YouTube, something like, recently, again, this is another one of things like, why have you thrown away your career by playing these other games? And it's just like, dude, you're missing the point. Like, I had another career.
I am building my career here. Like, I'm not, that's the opposite, right. I feel. Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of the year. My name is Xavier, and I'm here with Meredith as always. I know it's been a little bit of time since the last episode, which was actually end of year last year, but we actually restructured the episode and we're really excited to present the first version right now. There's even more. It's going to be coming in the next few episodes, but from now on you can expect one episode a week for the rest of the year. So welcome, Meredith. How are you?
Yay. Xavier, I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. And today's topic, we're going to be diving into the psychology behind games and the people who make them. And we have FilthyRobot with us to help us talk about this. Filthy, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
We're good. It's been 4 months since the start of the year, since our last podcast episode. Quite a bit of time. Have you survived out there, Filthy?
It's I live in Iowa and it's been a long winter, so yeah,
yeah,
I understand that
tough.
Feeling of April. You like poke your head out and you're like, yeah, time to get started. So
yeah, 100%. That's what happened.
The good news is that spring is around the corner. Actually, spring is here, but it still kind of feels a bit colder. I'm up here in Montreal, Canada, right? So it's also there's still snow. Let's just put it that way. Slowly though, it's we're feeling like we can actually breathe, right?
Yeah, and we'll get a couple months of breath in between, and then it'll be back to winter again. So
exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Starting on a high note with me.
Yeah. And, I mean, I have to say, I caught COVID a few weeks back. Unfortunately, I'm vaccinated and all that, but just I got it. I don't know how actually, but the good thing about getting COVID is that I got it almost as soon as Elden Ring came out, and I was just able to play the game nonstop, 24/7. Like I had a good excuse. I'm not saying that if I was working, I would not have played 24/7 in Elden Ring, but have you played the game at all?
Well, what you just described is, I think, a major impetus for streaming in general. What you've just done is you said, I can just ignore the guilt of wanting to just like grind this game right now because it's for my recovery process. And that's streaming in a nutshell, right? Like I can grind the hell out of something I'm really enjoying, looking forward to, playing for an audience, and I get to do that with guilt-free as part of my job responsibilities. I haven't played Elden Ring. I've heard it's been excellent. It's one of those ones with me as kind of a small streamer that I try to not necessarily stay away from it, but it's a very congested category. There's a lot of big names playing it. There's a lot of people across a lot of different backgrounds playing it. So, and it's not really the type of game that I generally play. It looks excellent, but just probably won't be playing that on stream ever. And then maybe you'll check it out off stream at some point.
Yeah, I was very surprised by the game. Honestly, I'm not a big Souls guy. I like to. I'm a bit insecure about my own, gaming skills. So I don't like to get crushed by games in general. And I was afraid that this would happen with Elden Ring, just like any other or most of other Souls games. And actually I was quite surprised about how kind of like the open world aspect of the game lets you really go at your own pace, and I was actually better than I thought at the game, frankly. I don't know if it's the game making me feel that way or whatnot, but like I really was really a fun experience. Actually, I'm still playing the game, obviously investing less time nowadays than I did a few weeks back, but
you can always just catch another variant of COVID.
Yeah, he was sick for 3 weeks. I was like, dude, like COVID doesn't last that long.
I got
Where
COVID,
are you?
I got the flu.
Maybe
Yeah.
you're a
And then,
long hauler and you don't know it. Maybe
Yeah.
you should take a little bit more time on that recovery.
No, but it's I highly recommend it. I know it's not kind of like your bag of games that you would play on stream, but off stream I think is a great experience. I think it's the type of game that I would wish anybody would try it, actually, just because it's one of the best games I've ever played, I would say. And that's coming from a guy who wasn't really much a Souls game. Actually made me want to play more Souls games, and so anyways, a lot of fun. But what did you play for the past few months?
So I do variety streaming as a whole, and I mostly do niche strategy gaming is kind of where I put myself. So Recently I've been playing the most recent Battle Brothers DLC, Have you even heard of the game Battle Brothers out of curiosity?
I have not. Actually.
Yeah, it's a small indie game that has done one of these games that's gotten better over time as it's been around for a while. More and more DLCs coming out, a bigger audience. It just recently released on Switch, so we got a bunch of people who are coming in to play it from a console game that mostly haven't seen this game, that kind of thing. So I do small games like that. So I'm happy to go through games that I play on stream if that's something that's interesting to talk about. But by and large, there are going to be a lot of titles that most people haven't heard of. So.
Which is cool. It's great to
that's
discover
great.
games. That's why we do what we do as well at Streamforge. Discovering games nowadays is so it's difficult. It's just a difficult process. As a gamer, you want to know which games are coming out, and there's a lot of games coming out very often. Every day there's dozens of games coming out, and what you mostly hear is like mainstream news about big games coming out and so on and so forth. The smaller games, you tend to go back to your favorite streamer, small, medium sized streamer that is a variety streamer like you, and plays games that they like, and they trust your opinion. So if they say, hey guys, you've been following me for a while now, this is a game I really like, they most likely will check it out, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's like people like you too that help those smaller games like kind of pop off too, because I feel like I've been seeing a lot more games like that get notoriety from, the smaller streamers, and then by word of mouth they just spread around, and then before you know it, like they're all over Twitch sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a weird situation to be in because you can't grow viewership with tiny games. But sometimes you can get ahead of the curve and finding a really good game that's a small unknown game, and then that later on feeds viewership down the line. And a lot of the stuff that's done really well on my channel has been that, right? When I first started playing Battle Brothers, I'm streaming to 150 people on Battle Brothers who are all my viewers who have come to check out whatever game I'm playing. Yeah. And now I log into that, and a stream right now is 12 to 1,300 people on stream watching this, because this game has exploded in the last couple of years, and I'm just ahead of the curve and getting enmeshed in that game. So
absolutely, and you're not the only one. It's something that happens to a lot. Lucky creators. It happens to a few lucky creators. I know Jorbs was talking last year. Talked about Slay the Spire did that for him. He played Slay the Spire way before he got popular, and when it got popular, boom, it was ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, Jorbs is a buddy of mine, and it's been incredible what he's done with that. And kudos to him. Like I can't do that exact strategy with what he's done with that, which is he's now kept with that game almost for 2.5 years or something, 2.5, 3 years. It's coming up on some absurd amount. And that game is an incredible game, and it's super fun. But I just, for my own mental health, I cannot play a game like that long, that many times in a row, especially when it's a similar style thing. It just drives me nuts. So like part of the variety for me has been strategy of staying sane while doing this.
Yeah.
So
super important.
Yeah, but I think there's some really big benefits in investing in a single game if you're trying to do streaming as a career, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
And
awesome.
Merit, Merit. We've talked about games we've played. I know you've played a few games this year as well, since the last episode. What have you played?
Yeah, so definitely was playing Young Souls for a while. I think it's super fun. Xavier, I'm a lot like you. Like, if I just get destroyed in a game, I'm like, this sucks. Like, why am I doing this? So throw it on easy mode and cruise through and have a blast. So yeah, that's been the game that I've actually been playing most recently. And then also, big throwback is GTA San Andreas on the Switch. And it's been really fun. Yeah, it's been great. So those are my top 2 of this year so far.
Nice. Yeah, on the Switch, it just came out not too long ago, right? Was it part of like the trilogy release?
Yeah. So yeah, they did that. Yeah, I can't remember when that came out. I think it was pretty recent though. Yep. But yeah, it's been a blast to just run around. I played that game like years ago, so it's fun to play on the Switch too. I actually like it quite a bit.
Does it feel like, is it remastered? Like, does it feel like you're playing an old game, or is it still like feels pretty fresh?
It's kind of a combination of both, I think. I mean, I think with like the Switch, obviously certain elements are like automatically a little bit different. So it does feel different, but like the graphics are like very similar to what they used to be. I would say that they got probably like a slight redo, which was probably
like high res. It's now high res,
right?
Like
was totally like warranted, but it still has that like kind of like older feel to it, which is nice.
Yeah, that's cool. I actually got the game, like the trilogy. I just haven't dug into it. I actually replayed GTA 5. Yeah, the new HD version on the console, 4K and stuff like that. That's actually quite fun. It's a beautiful game, but it's starting to show its age. Like, like you're playing like a recent 4K game nowadays, and it's like you do see the difference, but it looks beautiful still. Well, Filthy, I'm sure our listeners are super thrilled about hearing Meredith and I talk about the games we played this year. But I'm also very sure that for real that they want to know more about you. So let's just jump into the interview section of the podcast.
Sounds good.
I will go ahead and start us off, and feel free to kind of take this wherever you want. There's no rules. So I know that you started streaming when you were in grad school, right? As kind of a way to unwind, and you do have a master's in psychology. So what about streaming in particular did you find to be helpful in taking kind of your mind off of the stress of everyday life? Like, was it just playing games and being in the moment, or did it have something more to do with like the stress of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a gamer all my life, right? So gaming is a stress relief. It's a leisure activity. It's something I do for fun, and I like thinking about things deeply. So strategy games are a nice way to encompass that into gaming, making that both engaging myself but also relaxing kind of deal. I can't say anything about streaming was at all whatsoever relaxing. Ever.
Right. Yeah.
But,
that's where I'm like, that does not sound relaxing to me.
So what it was I was playing these games and I was doing well in these games, and this was multiplayer Civ 5, and Civ 5 has had this really weird kind of life cycle of a game that just keeps on going. If you like look at its trending on Steam, it's like still to this day there's like average day counts are like 27,000 users kind of deal. It's one of these games that lives forever, and I seem to just hit kind of that nice little niche of doing really well in this. And then a friend of mine asked me, like, why don't you stream this? And I had never heard of streaming. So I like looked around and Googled around. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is 2014, I think, when I was doing this. So I wasn't exactly ahead of the curve in hearing of it, but maybe a little bit ahead of the curve of thinking of doing this as a full-time job.
Sure.
So anyways, got into that, started streaming. As I was streaming, people would ask things like, hey, could you put this up on YouTube? We can't watch the stream. Will you upload it to YouTube? So that's when I started YouTubing. And then it was after doing that for some time that I was reaching this point in graduate school where I was feeling a bit burnt out with graduate school. I gotten my master's. I was in a program that was continuing on for my PhD, and I was starting to have these doubts about, well, what would it look like when I finish? Do I really want to be a professor? I enjoy the research, the asking the questions and answering the questions, but I get really tired of writing up the answers to these questions. And the academic publishing process is really not something I'm very interested in. Teaching, I like, but teaching and research are often competitive almost in how you specialize once you come out of graduate school. So there was some element of, I'm not sure I want to do this as a profession anymore. And this streaming stuff was starting to take off, and people were making actual livings out of this, which was blowing my mind that I could make a living playing games, which had just been a very engaging hobby of my life. So my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, said you should take a sabbatical, take a year off graduate school and give it a try, see what it's like, see if you can make a living. People want to come and watch you do this. They're asking you for your content. You're doing so well at this. Why not at least give it the attempt to be something bigger? So for me, so I took a year off graduate school with the idea that I could come back if I wanted to with my program, and did streaming for a year, and was like, okay, I don't want to go back. I want to do this. And that's where I've been since, by and large.
Cool. That's a really rad story, actually. I kind of love that. But yeah, I feel like teaching is hard, right? It's one of those things that, like, to be good at it, you have to love it. And if your heart isn't there, like, it's not there. So
well, I get a lot of the teaching in what I do. A lot of my content is educationally content for gaming, which is just a nice area to put that in. Although I do sometimes feel a little disingenuous telling a story like this, because I don't think streaming is a particularly great career for people by and large, and people getting into it ask a lot of the same questions and want the kind of answer of, well, what's the route to do it? And I'm not convinced there is a very clean route to become a popular streamer, especially a streamer who can make a living off doing it. I'm not sure it's as simple as, well, you're passionate about it and you like it. That's not enough. It's a really saturated market.
Yeah. You can increase your odds of success by working hard, doing some research, applying some principles, or like to your daily routine, to your weekly routine, whatnot. But there's certainly no we've searched for it. I promise you that. We've looked for it. And to me, it's just like any other kind of like field, like being a musician or just an artist overall, an actor. You can be the most talented person in the world, but you need some luck for sure, and you need some timing as well, and you need some hard work, and it's all of these combined still doesn't like guarantee anything whatsoever. You know.
Yeah, that's what you say resonates a lot with me there, which is the best I've been able to do with this, and the best I've heard anyone doing this is essentially be prepared for good luck, right? So do all your legwork to set up for it, and then get lucky. And you can't control the get lucky, but you can control what you do with it once you got lucky. So yeah.
And I think we're going into like a topic that I find very interesting here. Is that I've done some content creation myself, and I think that putting all into this your career, creating content, increases your what you wish you can accomplish. For example, like you're working hard every day, and you're like, my numbers should go up. Why aren't my numbers going up? It doesn't go as fast as I would want, and stuff like that. And even if you think like, you're thinking, well, I just got to keep on doing it, be prepared for, if I get lucky and whatnot. But ultimately, like when you're working very hard, you expect something back. And that's just how life typically works, right? It's not perfect science, but it's still like, I feel like the mentality of a lot of people, including myself at the time. And, I got disappointed at some point, and I feel like it can be very difficult mentally for content creators to just start and have very high expectations right off the bat, because they see their people they look up to, how big they are and how small they are. And I'm using air quotes here because I don't like this comparison. To me, it's like, I just don't like to say small and big, whatnot. It's more complex than that in my mind. But still, like, have you ever struggled with that kind of pressure that you would put on yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure. And some thoughts on that of the expectation of return, and that not necessarily being a good place to start from. Sure. And that mentality will serve you well if you're starting or doing it as a hobby. But there's the flip side of that, which is, okay, if you are streaming or have devoted the time and effort to this, when do you stop? And at some point, there has to be a return for that. If you're going to do this professionally, if you're going to do this full time, as this is your source of income, you have to have some return on that, or you can't live. So,
right, yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I regularly struggle with that. Like I've been streaming again full time since 2014, or I think that's when it ended up starting for that. And there's been ups and downs. Last year was a bad year for me, as streaming years go. And I definitely sat there at the end of the year looking at the numbers, going, man, do I wish to continue doing this? Is this something that, and you're stuck, because again, the uncertainty and lack of control you have in this profession is particularly for me frustrating. Which is that I can't guarantee. I can't, if I put more work in, maybe it results in something more, maybe not. I had a comment on my YouTube that pissed me off the other day. It was commenting about like thumbnails, and like it was like, oh, you could do so much better with your channel if you invested some time in better thumbnails. And a part of me goes, well, I stream 40 hours a week. I do additional admin on top of that for things like sponsorships for channels, for maintaining that. I record outside of that for YouTube and upload to YouTube, do all the scheduling of the YouTube stuff myself, the thumbnail and the naming, the scheduling of it, the actual creation of that. And I start looking at this, and he's like, well, you could just put a couple more hours in, do some good thumbnails. And I'm like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about.
Dude, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, not only just the limited time, but also where is that time best invested? If I had another hour to put it in, is it really thumbnails the lowest hanging fruit? It seems unlikely to me.
There's other platforms like TikTok that I love to talk about, and also but seriously, it's a great platform for discovery, like the discoverability. It is very difficult to know where your time is best invested, and I hear you. It can be very frustrating.
And I think perhaps in this profession compared to others, which is, I think there's a lot more of a clear path than other professions. Like my wife is a university professor, and the path from that is very clear. You graduate from graduate school, perhaps you do some postdocs, you apply to some positions, you get in as an adjunct professor, you do some time there as basically a starting professor, you get on a tenure track, you then get your tenure, and then you're a tenured professor, then maybe you move up at some point a little bit later in a pay grade, but that's the track of your career. Along the way, you have benchmarks that you understand, things like publications, things like teaching loads, things like community service for your department. These things are all tick marks that you can go through if you're looking through, how do I progress in this profession? And there's nothing like that in streaming. Like the progression in there is all hidden from you as a person studying that. All you either really, so for example, like sponsored content on your channel becomes one of the driving forces of income for a channel past a certain size. Like certainly viewer count directly relates to how much that's going to be worth for you, but growing viewers alone isn't enough to make a living. right? So it's like the stuff that comes with that. So realizing, anyways, so I always find it sad when I get asked these things. I've done a number of talks about this at various locations. I always find it sad when people who are asking, how do I get into it, and are focused on wanting it and wanting success in it, but there's no way I can be like, here's how to guarantee that, like you could in another profession. It's not just like go well, get good grades, apply to these places, get accepted, etc. Right? It's so anyway. So I think unique to this profession perhaps is how frustrating the lack of certainty is for so much of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd imagine that there's kind of like pros and cons with that too, right? Of like, oh, it's a build your own adventure. That's great. But also it's a build your own adventure. So how we're going to get there if we get there, right? Like it's all up in the air. So,
yeah.
So Filthy, you started out as a Civ 5 player, right? And then you transitioned into becoming a variety streamer. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like for you to build a community like around this one game and then transition into playing a multitude of games from that? Like, how did your audience take that? How did you handle that? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think I would describe that with one word, which would be awful. And
okay.
because it works because it was such an organic process for me, right? Like I got asked, hey, would you be willing to stream what you're doing? We want to know how you're doing so well. And then that was kind of the people in this community of people I were gaming with, then watching my streams and interacting with them. And then from that, the YouTube following from that. So a lot of it was kind of an organic growth of this. And I assumed that would essentially be, some part of me assumed, hey, they're tuning in to watch your stuff. If you want to change games, this is no problem. And it turns out that is absolutely not how people interact with me on the other end of this. So there was a ton of pushback, and there remains pushback. It's not a banned question, but it's a frowned upon question in my channel, because I still get people all the time coming from a YouTube video being like, hey, when are you going to play Civ 5 again? I haven't played Civ 5 on stream regularly in something like 5 years.
I may have commented that. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm kidding. I love civilization, but I hear you. It's like, it's a very niche game. I love Civ. I played Civ since Civ 2, and it's like, it's so niche that how do you get out of this? Like,
well,
yeah.
I think that's a trap, especially as a small streamer, which is if you tie your life cycle as a streamer to a single game, you in some way copy the life cycle of that game. If that game has its ups and its big spike, and that's the high point of that, and that's great, but then that game inevitably trails off as other games release, as the popularity of that goes down. And Civ's one of these games that has had a much longer half-life than most of these other games, like with the Steam stats I mentioned earlier. But I don't want to do that forever. And I don't want my life tied to that. I found, I think I finished that game when I stopped playing that game on stream. I think I was close to 6,000 hours played of that game.
Wow.
I'm a blunt guy. I'm what's called low agreeableness when you look at personality traits. I'm one of the bottom percentiles for agreeableness. And part of what this means is I fake well poorly. So I don't put a big smile on when I'm fucking hating what's going on right now. And for me, eventually I hit a wall with Civ. It was just like, I don't want to play this anymore. I didn't get into this to play this game for the rest of my life. I play a variety of games that I enjoy, and the streaming experience for me became about, the fun part of that was sharing this with my viewers, right? So having these games and doing these things and experiencing them and making the guides for this and getting super in depth with this with a group of people who wanted to watch that was great for me. That was the part of streaming that was a big high point. The low point of then moving away from Civ was I couldn't do it anymore, didn't want to do it anymore, would go insane doing it anymore. And a large part of my audience was betrayed by that, was the idea of like, hey, why aren't you playing this game this is the only thing we know you from and for, and the only thing we want to see you do. And we're certainly not going to give you a chance to do something with a different game, another small game that we've never heard of, that we're not interested in. And we're going to give you a lot of shit about it. And I still get a lot of shit about it. Still comments on my YouTube, something like, recently, again, this is another one of things like, why have you thrown away your career by playing these other games? And it's just like, dude, you're missing the point. Like, I had another career.
I am building my career here. Like, I'm not. That's the opposite.
Right.
I feel it's like, as if you stick to Civ, it's not a great way to grow necessarily over time. It's like when Civ 6 comes out, I hope you'll play it. If not, you're going to be in trouble. Your community is going to shit on you. But seriously, like, it might be a good opportunity to play more Civ. But getting stuck to one game that is very niche like this and that has ups and downs,
it was extremely disappointing when Civ 6 released and it was garbage, because that was exactly the hope was, hey, this might be a way out of this box of simultaneously not wanting to do this anymore and then also keeping that audience around. But yes, and a part of me goes,
it's my mistake. I meant Civ 7.
Yeah.
It's my bad.
Fingers crossed. I hope that game's great. I would love to invest some hours in
Yeah.
it. It's not going to be the only game I ever play again in my life, but yeah, it would be awesome if it were.
Yeah.
But and I mean, maybe this is because I come from this with a background of having other training and very close to another career, which is when I look at these things, it tends to be, if I kept streaming and just kept that grind mentality of, well, all my viewers are in Civ, I'm going to do this regardless of whether I like it or not. Well, the reasons I came here in the first place were I was feeling like this other profession was going to be less enjoyable. This seemed like a way that I could embrace both a hobby and also something I was very passionate about doing, as well as make a living. The second I pull the passion out of this whole dream dies for me. So the second if I acquiesce to that section of my viewer base that wants me to do that, I'm just going to walk away from streaming. I'll go do something that isn't miserable for me and makes better money, has these like clear priority, like progression path, and do that. So it's a weird place to be. And I feel like a lot of variety streamers deal with this, especially if they're small and they grew on a single game where all of their viewers are there, have found them at least through that game, and are very likely to want to stay with the game that they were interested in watching to begin with. So
if you feel like shit playing your game, nobody's gonna really have fun. You know, they might like the idea of you playing that game, but you know, if they watch you be miserable playing that game, I don't think they're gonna have that much fun anyways. You know, it's just maybe hard for them to understand that, visualize that, I guess. I don't know. But great, let's jump into our next section, which is actually today's topic. We actually started talking about it a little bit anyways.
We did.
But,
we kind of did. Yeah, we spoiled it a bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, psychology and gaming. Let's get to that section right now.
Filthy, what are some of the psychological aspects behind a game that make someone want to keep coming back and keep playing it instead of kind of, playing it once, oh, that was fine, going on to something else, right? Like, what is it about these games that are fan favorites, if you will, that makes people really like pick them up and then come back to them every single time?
All right, I was kind of, when you guys reached out to me initially about this was part of the discussion I had when you guys were talking about ideas for what we talk about here. So I'm going to respond to this, and it's a bit of a curveball, and I'm sorry for that up front, but it works something like this, right? Like, psychology is pretty diverse in terms of where that covers. And then the first thing that people mostly think about with psychology, they think about clinical psychologists, which are people like treating people with depression who are doing like counseling, this type of thing. As a clinical psychologist, I was a research psychologist, and I was a research psychologist in social psychology, looking at a specific topic of human sexuality. That was my research stuff. So when you ask me what psychologically makes someone play games, I can give you my Psych 102 intro to take on that, and I'm sure I've encountered stuff along the way that's related to that, but it's not my area of expertise, and I don't pretend that it's my area of expertise. So I'm happy to speculate on that if we want to go down that way, or we could take a look at some of the other psychology related stuff. I think for me, some of the topics that are most interesting to that are more things along like personal development, things like boundary management, things about looking at work-life balance. These things are the things that a lot of the psychology that I've had have played into this for me much more so than that. I mean, there's all sorts of things like, there's also some negative sides for, if we're just speculating on random stuff of why people might enjoy games. There's some negative sides of that too, like things like dopamine hits from playing games, like the addictiveness of this. You're looking at like some of the gotcha games, of the mobile genre that are designed specifically to time sink you, who that pull you back, fight for your attention, like all this stuff. You can look at the psychology of that and you go, man, maybe we don't want as much psychology in our gaming because we're not necessarily going with the positive things with that. The people with the influence, the companies building these who are willing to invest in that as a resource to figure out how do we get people to play our games are pulling on some of the strings that we as gamers probably don't want pulled on.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about hormones, because I do feel like, I mean, but I know as humans, like we get, we have a lot of hormones, we have a lot of things that releases hormones in our body and the way we react to things and so on and so forth. And one thing that happens, one thing that I do that I know is a bit problematic and I want to get rid of it is look at my phone whenever I watch TV or a series or a movie or something like that when I'm at home. And I feel like it's my brain telling me like I need even more stimulation or something. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I'm really drawn to my phone. So I tend to like almost like lock up my phone if I'm watching a series or a movie, if not like, and it just becomes, I don't even like it, frankly. And I feel like as human beings, we get, there's a lot of stimulus, if you want to call it that, or whatever you want to call it, right? Stimuli. I don't know how to say it. How would you say it, Filthy? But
yeah, a lot of stimuli. Yeah.
So whether it's a game or if it's another medium or through your phone and whatnot, I think as a society we do have a lot of those integrated into our daily lives. And I personally I hear you, like with the gacha games trying to get you like to sink more time in, but like every single game developer, I'm not saying like wants you to play their games. Like that's the goal. Like how they get to it, this doesn't need to have gacha like mechanics or whatnot, but like they want you to play the game, at least finish the story, because there's people that wrote that story, for you to play like that 15-hour campaign. And they're fighting versus like all the other games, because that 15-hour is yours and they want you to pick their games to spend that 15 hours on, right? So like, I know there's different mechanics or different ways to get to that, and maybe some methods that are not as clean as others, potentially, but I do think it's like a more of a society issue where we get so much stimulation out of everything we look at, the screens, that whatnot, that how do you, as a game developer, how do you deal with that? You have these gacha games that take hours and hours away from potential player base. How do you deal with that?
Well, I don't think we start there, because although you will get some subset of game developers who are ethically oriented, trying to incorporate that into that, it's probably going to be fairly delayed relative to the people who don't have those ethical restrictions, and then also B, to when it becomes anything acted upon in the industry. So I think you want to start the other way, right? Which is looking, at least for me, I almost think of it as like hygiene, right? It's like gaming hygiene. It's like what level of interaction with my life do I want gaming to take? Do I want it everywhere? No, I don't want to be. So I'll give 2-second example of this, right? So I did a sponsorship a couple years ago for Raid, right? Everyone's done Raid sponsorships. I actually like the game Raid, and it's not ridiculous.
Not sponsored.
Yeah, not at all sponsored. Right now. I like that game, but I like that game when I understand what that game is attempting to do to me and have my limits with that. And I played it on stream a couple times. Like I think I did 3 promotions, and the 3rd promotion I actually picked it up and played a little bit offline kind of deal. I had a long car trip, and it was fun to play on my phone on the way down kind of deal, right? And I came back from that, and I noticed I was playing it for like about a month, and then I noticed that I started to lose a little bit of sleep over it. My brain, which is pretty interested in strategy games in general, would wake me up for certain things and be like, oh, one of your timers is up. And when I realized that's what it was that was waking me up, I stopped and I quit the game. Because for me, that had crossed my boundary for what I was interested in. That I like being engaged with the game when I'm not playing it, thinking strategies about it, planning, building my character, or thinking how these synergies are going to play together, or thinking of the next video I'm going to make for this game. That to me is where I want that interaction with the game. I don't want this game screwing with my external activities, screwing with my sleep schedule, making me unhappy about progression, like my life from progression in that game. So there's that. So for me, it's about the hygiene of that, the boundaries that I draw between what I want from the game and what it's giving me versus what it might attempt to do. So I don't mind a game like Raid, and Raid is definitely one of those games that wants you to spend money. It's designed to, it's a gacha game, right?
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
It's a mobile game, in
yeah.
general, that's, yeah.
And I'm fine that exists, but I'm fine with that exists as me as an educated person who has a pretty good sense of self, interacting with that with my own boundaries on that. I'm less okay with that for people who aren't able to do that, or just that being the general consensus of the gaming industry of that's the type of game they want to build. So
well, yeah, I think you possibly more educated when it comes to that stuff versus the masses, if you will, just because of the fact that you went to school and you studied psychology, so just that puts you in a special mental environment, if you will, so you can really understand how your brain reacts to certain things. I think most people don't. They would not be seen as a problem, because everybody would be like, hey, I feel like it's pushing me over the edge. That's my limit. I'm out. But more people don't do this. It's like casinos. People go to casinos, spend their savings, and like, whoops, I don't got any money anymore, and they don't got control over themselves. So, but that's why I was talking about like how, as a developer, do you deal with that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, I'm not saying like every game should be a gacha game at all, but I'm just wondering, as a developer fighting, because your goal again is to get time from gamers to play your game. and you're fighting against other games, even though it's a great industry and everybody a very friendly industry. They're not necessarily competitors. I don't see themselves that way, but still on paper that's how it is. So is there something a game developer should do, or do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, and I'm sorry to answer I'm not trying to avoid your question. It's just I think
It's fine.
I think the lower. So I generally, when I look at the improvement stuff, right, like I'm looking at lowest hanging fruit. What's the easiest thing to improve? What's the passive lethal resistant? What am I going to get most bang for my buck on an improvement for that? And I think starting on the developer end is asking for that to be a much more arduous task than starting on the player end. So when I think of that question, I flip it slightly. I go, what can I do as a player to make sure that I'm engaging with games in the way that I want? So I don't think I could start here's the developer. The developer's conflicted already. The developer wants to sell their product. The developer is, dealing with other people inputting onto their vision compared to what they're actually going to produce, right? They're constrained by things like time constraints for their releasing this product for investors, etc. I would not start there. I would start from the player. I would start with understanding what you want from gaming, figuring out what your boundaries are from that, understanding the games that you're interested in, what part of you are they appealing to, and is that part that you want to engage with gaming? So for example, like I'm a mood eater, right? So if I am boredom in particular is for me, I'll eat something because I'm bored. So I design structures in my life to make that more difficult. So the same with if you are a gotcha gamer, who plays these games and feels the need to purchase that next level up or get that progression, and you notice that regularly in your life, that's something you want to build systems in to make that more difficult for you to be taken advantage of. And yeah, you can wait and say, well, ethically, maybe the developer should be doing that, but there's nothing to force them to do that yet. And there's no guarantee we're going to get that change. And it's certainly not there now. So if you're trying to make that something better for your life, starting on the other end makes more sense to me.
Yeah, no, I feel you.
I think I think that's a really interesting point too, of like, okay, well, what can I do about it, right? Like, it's a lot easier to take it from that angle than the other way too. So yeah, it's an interesting explanation.
I do think that developers can certainly maybe communicate more and more, not with the players. I think communication is because obviously what you're doing when you're setting off like boundaries for yourself, you're basically communicating to yourself. You're telling yourself, that you're crossing some limits, let's say. But like, I think being vocal and to communicate with your player base is always good. Whether it comes to like overly spending on a game or whatnot, but like just communicating overall. I think the gamers community, we love that. We like to get have a conversation and feel heard and feel taken in consideration by the game developers. It's always a winning formula, I feel.
Yeah, I agree with that. I work fairly closely with a couple developers, and my favorite ones to work with are the ones who are highly responsive to the community's takes on their games. Now, there is a problem with that, right? The flip side of that is the same flip side of me complaining about some of my YouTube comments. The fact of being, when you engage with a lot of people, is you get a wide range of opinions and a wide range of expertise and a wide range of competence levels coming at you. And I certainly don't want my favorite games crowdsourced by the lowest common denominator of input deciding what occurs out of that. So I think there's a flip side to that, but I agree in general that yes, transparency is very nice, especially when you're thinking strategy games. Seeing someone lay out their strategy for the development of this game or the future development of this game is really appealing to a lot of us playing that way, for sure.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're ready to move on to the next section, which is the quiz section.
Okay. This is going to be really fun, so get excited. Okay, guys, we're going to ask Filthy a bunch of questions so y'all can get to know him a little bit better. So, Filthy, are you ready?
Can you give me just a hint about this format? Are these like quick first thing comes to mind, first answer kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a this or that. So I'll give you two options and you pick whichever one sparks your fancy.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Go ahead.
All right. Black or white?
Black.
Pizza or sushi?
Sushi.
Twitch or YouTube?
Twitch.
Winter or summer?
Summer.
Battle Brothers or Civilization?
Battle Brothers.
Okay. Horror or comedy?
Comedy.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Console or PC?
PC.
Dogs or cats?
Neither.
Ooh, okay. All right, we'll let that one slide. Strategy or RPG?
Strategy.
Okay.
There you go.
You pass.
I passed. Excellent.
You picked the correct answers.
I mean, actually,
is this the secret advancement part of Twitch I didn't know about? Am I got to the next level?
Yeah, surprise.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I think that's all we have.
My name is Xavier Constantin, guys, and this was episode 11 of Streamforge Radio. I want to thank Meredith and FilthyRobot for participating in this episode. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And Filthy, how can people find you online?
Best place is probably still my Twitch, which is just FilthyRobot, all one word, twitch.tv. Otherwise, I'm also run a fairly large YouTube. You can find me on Twitter, filthy_robot. Those are the best places.
Awesome. If you've enjoyed this episode, guys, make sure to like, subscribe, share our podcast. All the links to find us and find Filthy online are in the description below, whether you're on YouTube or Apple or Spotify. Guys, we'll see you next week for another episode of Streamforge Radio. Thank you for listening.